Welcome. Okay, and thank you, Anne, for recording. Today we're having Luvvie Ajayi Jones, and introducing her is Paula. But first of all, for housekeeping, if you have any questions, please drop them in the chat, and we will get to them during the Q&A portion at the end of the discussion. And today will be recorded and later be posted on our YouTube and Spotify podcast. So I'm going to pass it on over to Paula. Thank you so much.
Hi, everybody, and welcome. Welcome. This is kind of our pre-pub event for a wonderful book that's coming out in the spring, right, Luvvie?
Absolutely, in the spring.
Yeah. Anne, did you want to say anything, or I don't want to? Okay.
No, you're good to go, Paula.
Oh, we're good to go. Okay, great. It's the two of us now and everybody else out in virtual world. But Luvvie, you are such a dynamic speaker, podcast host, author. If you haven't seen any of those things, you should avail yourself now. Her first book, I'm Judging You, collection of essays of social commentary, and her book that will be coming out in the spring. You have it behind you, Luvvie. It looks great too. Your covers are fabulous. Professional Troublemaker. Yeah. And, but you have a couple of videos, TED Talks, which honestly, I had seen one of them before a while back, and I was kind of refreshing myself on it recently for today's talk, and was kind of blasé about it, like, oh, I've seen this before. Before I knew it, I was all ramped up again. So, it's just something good to go back to and remind yourself of, because in it, you talk a lot about fear and facing your fears, and how you face your fears. That 1 year we'll do it. We'll talk about that, the ones you took on specifically, I think in 2015 or 2016. But I think we all want to know a little bit about you and your inspiration to even follow this path and write these books. Why the first one and why the one that we're going to get in the spring?
Yes. So I have been writing on these interwebs for 17 years as a blogger, and it was the accidental career. Like, being a writer was not the plan for me. I thought I was going to be a doctor, but chemistry and the deed that I got there killed that dream very quickly. But I think this person that I've become and show up in the world as is because when I started blogging, I didn't have to necessarily think about strategy or this plan that I was going to be this thing. So I was always just writing in the way that most true. So I'm Judging You came to be as my first book because I ended up getting plagiarized by a journalist who said that he didn't know that he wasn't supposed to take my words without credit. And I created that book because I was like, is there not a limited edition handbook on how not to be terrible at being a human? And that's ultimately the book that I wrote. And I always want to create work that I want to consume. I was like, I want that book so I can give it to other people. I want that book so I can read it. I want that book so I can laugh. So I wrote that book that I wanted. Because, I think about the Toni Morrison quote of, if it doesn't exist, you create it. Or if you want it, you create it. So that's basically what I do. And Professional Troublemaker came to be because book one is the Do Better manual. Professional Troublemaker is the Fear Fighter manual. And for us to do better, we're going to have to do a lot of things that scare us in this world. We're going to have to do things that challenge us, that make us anxious, that make us feel like they're bigger than us if we want to do anything of note in this world. So I wanted to write the book that I needed when I was afraid to call myself a writer, because I was like, this was not the plan. Doctor was the plan. When I didn't see a writer that looked like me or did the thing that I did in the way that I did it, right? I compared myself to the Toni Morrisons and said, she's an amazing novelist. How can I call myself the same thing that Toni Morrison is? So I think about this book when I turned down my TED Talk 3 times, the TED Talk that changed my life. I was afraid of doing it because I didn't think I was ready. So, wow. I think about this book in the moments when I want to do something that just feels bigger than me. And I needed that book, right? I was like, what is the book that I need to pick up from somebody who looks like me in the moments where I'm scared to show up in my full self, in the moments where I want to do something that feels uncharted, in the moment where I'm just like, it'll be easier to be quiet. So I wrote that book. Professional Troublemaker is that book that I needed 10 years ago. It's the book that I needed 5 years ago when I turned 30 and decided to go skydiving. It's the book that I need now when I'm like, you know, well, the world can be a dumpster fire and I'm being called to show up in a way that might scare me. So that's what Professional Troublemaker, the Fear Fighter, represents. And I'm so excited for people to read it because it feels like the big sister to book one. It feels like it speaks of my evolution as a person, as a leader, as a writer, as a human, right? And it is the perfect next book for me. And I think to this day, it is the best thing I've ever done.
You know, it's interesting that you say it was the perfect next book, because they do seem so perfect, one before the other, the way they came out, but it almost feels like a sequel, even though I don't think you approached the writing that way, but it just, because of where you were in your life for the first book and then going into this next book, it just seemed like a natural sequel.
Absolutely. And, you know, a lot of people were thinking like, oh, are you going to do I'm Judging You Part 2? No. This one stands on itself, but like to your point, it is the sequel because it has a through line. You know, my voice is still very apparent in it. I make sure, and I think I'm stronger than ever as a writer and as just a woman, and it shows up in my work. And I think it's deeper and I think it's funny. And how I approached it was just right in the way that was most true, using all the lessons that has moved you forward. Hopefully somebody else reads this book and says, you know what, because I read it, it transformed something about my life, or it transformed something about the way I think about something, or it made me bolder in knowing that I can be this person who, even though she's afraid, she's still audacious. So that's my hope for this book. And that's why I'm like, I hope book one made you say, you know what, I do have to leave the world better than I found it. And I hope book two is a book that tells you, now I know how I can do that.
Yeah. And as you said, you have 5 years there. And how much do you feel like your own personal maturity and actual physical, 5 years passing, however many years passing, impacted your writing, the way you were thinking, how you wanted to deliver that message? You're looking at through the lens of someone who's still young, but older.
Absolutely. It had everything to do with it, right? Even my perspective has shifted a little bit. And I had to write this in the middle of quarantine, right? Like I was under deadline and the whole world shuts down. And I'm writing a book about fear fighting during the most scary part of the world we've ever seen. Like we're inside because of a virus we can't see, because of this threat we can't see. And I have to write a book about doing scary things. So it was like the universe and God were testing me, like, let's see if you actually mean this. What does it look like to write a book about fear during a time of fear? So all of the lessons that I had learned leading up to this point pushed me forward in understanding that your purpose is sometimes bigger than the fear. Often it's bigger than the fear. The thing that you're supposed to do, that you're called to do, is usually going to be that thing that feels really hard, that feels like a test, almost a test of your strength and a test of your courage. And you are being called to rise up to meet it. And that's what I had to do. And I didn't, as I was writing it, and writing a book is isolating because unlike a blog post, unlike something you post on social media, you get instant feedback. You know it's either good or trash. For a book, you just have to sit with your words behind a computer screen. And then when you finish and you send it off to your editor, you cross your fingers and hope you didn't write trash. So when my editor came back to me, she put in her editor's note, she said, in my 20 years of editing, this is one of the biggest honors of my life. Oh. And that's when I was like, I've done something really good here. And hearing that feedback and having her reflect what reading the book meant to her and how it already started transforming her life. Mm-hmm. That's when I was like, I have done something really good here and I'm really proud of it.
Oh, absolutely. And when I was reading it to prepare for this, I was kind of in the middle of a transition, a professional transition, and deciding on timing and hesitating on certain things. And boy, it just kind of came together like, yeah, why am I hesitating? Because you're scared, but you need to face that and just do what you know is the next natural step. So yes, I agree with your editor. Your book does that. Even if you're not approaching the book for it to have that impact, it can't help but have that impact. It is so inspiring. And also during pandemic and while you were writing this, we lost somebody that meant a lot to all of us as far as present tense and his history. And he's a troublemaker, John Lewis. And I was just wondering, did his life, his death, the timing of it all impact you at all?
Absolutely. When John Lewis died, I actually called my editor and said, I need to make sure there's a John Lewis quote in this book. And I put the quote in chapter 6, which is called, where I'm talking about speaking truth to power. And it's his quote about making good trouble. And I realized that it was such a salient thing that needed to be in this book, because that's really the point of being a professional troublemaker. You hear the phrase and you're like, you could take something negative from it, but to make good trouble, to be a professional troublemaker, to be a disruptor in this world for good, right? So his life embodied that. There's no better capture of a man who lived and laid it all on the line to make good trouble, like trouble that changed the world and changed the culture. That's the best case scenario for the lives that we live. Like when we leave this world, we should be deeply missed because our presence should be felt, because while we were here, we brought light into every room we were in. We brought light by doing scary things, and we made somebody else's life better because we were here. So yeah, John Lewis's death, I was like, it's hard to be sad that he died, because that man lived as loud as possible. He lived through his purpose. He lived a long time, and he died surrounded by people who loved him. So that is the perfect way you can leave this world. And so when John Lewis died, I was like, the best way we can honor his memory and his legacy is to continue to take that example and live it ourselves.
Yeah, good trouble, necessary trouble. And I agree with you. I think we all felt a little sad, like, oh, he's gone. And certainly during this pivotal year, but you're right. It's like, I think collectively we knew he is the embodiment of living with purpose and a fulfilled life, because he touched all of us, and he touched policy, and such a good example. He's a good troublemaker, and I knew there was a connection there, and I loved it. And you mentioned going back to the TED Talk, though. You do talk about, as you do in this book, facing fears, that there are almost kind of like two types of fears. And there's examples of fears that hinder and fears that actually inspire, or in spite of the fears. Can you explain a little bit more about that?
So I think, fear is necessary. It is as universal as breathing. You cannot tell me somebody actually is not afraid of anything. If you're not afraid of anything, it's actually considered a disorder. Fear exists as an evolutionary response. It is what keeps us from putting our hands in hot fire. It is what tells us, don't jump off the cliff without a parachute. But that same fear is what tells us not to speak up in a meeting that we need to speak up in. That same type of evolutionary response tells us that, I don't want to negotiate because what if I'm told no? So we need to be very clear on the purpose of fear and not let it control our lives in the moments and in the spaces where it should not. And also knowing that just because it's so natural, I'm not saying stop being scared, stay scared, but you just have to commit to charging forward regardless. You have to just know that your job is to be true to you. And sometimes being true to you is going to mean doing the thing that's going to scare you.
Yeah, you kind of have to face your fears in one way or another. And I love how you talked about, you had your year of do it anyway, right? For people who haven't seen the talk or know what that's all about, can you please, because I love the photos of as you're doing it anyway. But I think it's served as a metaphor for anybody facing fears in their life, whether it's personally or professionally. Tell us some about your that year of Do It Anyway.
Yeah, so 5 years ago, I turned 30. And I decided that year I was actually not only going to do the things that scared me, but I was going to run towards them. Like I was actually going to seek out things that scared me and do it. And yeah, that year I ended up doing a lot of things.
Oh my gosh, how did you get in that plane? I'm sorry, that's one. I don't know if I can go there with you, that one on the plane and jumping off the plane.
Look, I'm not saying everybody has to jump out of a plane, but I ended up doing it because one of my friends asked me, and before I could overanalyze and come up with an excuse not to, my mouth said yes. So I was like, shoot, okay, let me honor that. You know what? I will go skydiving with you. Let's try it. And I did, and it was wildly scary, but it was also deeply inspiring for me because the adrenaline had me feeling like I could do anything. It made me feel like I could literally do anything. That year, I signed my book deal, my first ever book deal from Judging You, and I wrote the book. That year, I went to my first solo vacation by myself out of the country. I ended up doing it 4 more times. I went to Dominican Republic, Egypt, Mexico, Thailand, United Arab Emirates by myself. And I'd never done that before. I have a lot of friends who love to travel, but I decided, you know what? I'm not waiting for anybody else. And I'm just going to do what I want to do. That year, I swam underwater with dolphins, and I don't like being submerged in water at all. Like, that was not a fun thing. But I had a blast when I finally did it. I was like, oh my God, this is the best thing ever. But that year was significant because the habits and the compulsion and knowing that this thing will always scare you. Even after you've done it, it's still going to be like, I can't believe I did that. But the rewards afterwards far outweigh the fear. By me going to the vacations, I have memories that are just valuable. I ate food that was amazing. I walked around Thailand by myself and got a massage every 2 days because it was like $9. I have these memories of sitting in a different continent and being like, I can control wherever I go. Nobody's being like, well, do we have to wake up, at what time? And I want to do this thing, because of me doing the thing that scared me, which is included writing a whole book. I became a New York Times bestselling author. That thing instantly allowed me to retire my mother, which was a lifelong dream. Because of that year, all the domino effects of the things that happened in 2015 carry me to today, because that first book is what allowed me to get the deal for the second book without question. So there's a lot in our lives that can transform simply by being bold and audacious and just insisting on taking up the space, insisting on asking for what we want, just doing all these things that just you typically would convince yourself you shouldn't do, or there's some type of phantom consequence, or, it's going to backfire. There's a lot of times when we will opt out of the best case scenario in our lives because of fear. So my thing is, what happens when we say, what if the best case scenario happens? So I'm going to actually do that thing. So because we're afraid of the worst case scenario, we're constantly afraid of that thing, and we keep it from letting us get the best case scenario. So we don't ask for the thing. We don't, say the thing. We don't do the thing. So then we don't get the thing, the good thing that we want, and then we wonder why we don't get it.
Well, and a lot of what you said resonates as far as kind of our own self-doubt and us sometimes being our own worst enemy. But what about, how do people tackle when they're getting external negativity or fear coming at them? Like it's not even coming from themselves. How have you dealt with that to kind of pursue your dreams and what you being you? How do you do that when you're getting it from the outside and people even taking small steps to get to the dynamo that you are?
It's easier said than done, but it must be said. Other people's fears and projections do not belong to us. They're not for us to own. They're not for us to wear like a coat. People will always have fears about our lives. We'll always have doubts and anxieties, but we're not supposed to pick those anxieties up from them. It's for them to keep. So example, Me saying, hey, I'm going to Mexico. I got 5 comments from people being like, oh my God, the mosquitoes going to eat you up. And I'm like, how are you afraid on my behalf? And I'm telling you, I'm not even asking for your advice. You just threw your fears at me, and I'm supposed to now take this on. Our parents, our friends, the people who love us, sometimes our coworkers, just all the internet at large. All people do all day is throw their projections on other people, all types of trash at other people. And we have to work on fortifying ourselves to know in those moments that those are not our luggage to carry. It's not our baggage to hold on to. Because if I have held on to the fears that other people have given me, like if I actually hold it on, internalize it, I wouldn't do most of the things I'm doing now. I wouldn't be this person. I wouldn't be the writer. I wouldn't be, the person who went to Thailand by herself. People were like, you should just cancel. No, I'm not. So our lives are better when we do receive input and feedback from other people, but we have to learn to be more discerning on what we need to internalize and, constructive criticism, the actual calls for growth, and then what we need to dump as that has nothing to do with me. I'm just going to leave that over there because that's not useful to me. How does this serve my growth? How does this make me better? How does this make my life better? And if the person who you're talking to, and they're often people who love us, like our moms, our dads, if the person you're talking to is just usually prone to thinking about worst case scenarios instantly, some of that you got to shut out. Because don't put the bad thing that could happen on me, because now I'm going to start thinking about it. And you just have to know also who to go to. Because sometimes you have the friend who has a lot of anxiety, who is constantly just living in a small box of their own making, or sometimes society's making, because sometimes we get into these things because bad luck, bad situations, other people's decisions. Some of those people are not the ones you speak your dreams to. If you know this person is a Debbie Downer, if you know this person is constantly coming from a place of anxiety and doubt first, that is not the person to go to with your dream or your plan that's scary. Find the person in your life who enables you to be audacious. And I try to be that person for my friends. Like, if you call me and you're like, I have an amazing idea, I'm like, tell me everything. Okay, great. When is the deadline? You want me to hold you accountable? You want those people to be the ones you tell your dreams to. Don't tell your dreams to the person who's like, I don't know. Will that work? I don't know. That sounds scary. Should you do it? I don't think you should do it. That's scary. That person, let them know after the fact when you've done it. So they say, oh, congrats, not don't do it.
Yeah. No, that's great. I used to work with someone he referred to himself as a balcony person. He was on the balcony cheering you on. And those are the people you want, that you take the first steps. Like you said, the Debbie Downers, wait till it's a done deal.
Wait till
right?
It's done. Just wait till it's done.
Yeah. And you also talk about why it's so important to be fully ourselves. But isn't being fully ourselves like a constant ongoing process? Or are you saying that in every moment we can actually be fully ourselves? Or is it a process?
It is a process. We are evolving people. Whatever is not growing is dying. So who you are today might be different from who you are in 3 years, because you've just grown so much. Your ideas have changed. But who you are in the moment is who you should be in the room that you're in. Who you currently are should be who shows up. And, there's many reasons the world convinces us to be different, because, there's a lot of things happening, especially if you're marginalized or part of marginalized groups. There's a lot of people and messages that are telling you that you're not good enough or you're too much. And life is harder when we have to play dual roles, who we are and who people want us to be. I just find it easier to be who I am all the time, just because I'm like, I'm lazy. I don't have time to be 3 people. This is who I am. Take it or leave it. And I think being who you are, it's not about necessarily being uncheckable or just being like, can't nobody tell me nothing, or being like you can't receive criticism. But you also have to be clear what your core values are. Like, that's who you are. Your core values is who you are. What do you hold in dear? So in every room, I know that honesty is one of the things I hold dear. So I'm not going to come into one room and lie and then go into another room and be honest. It's I'm going to give you honesty on both sides. So that's what it means to be fully who you are. What your core values are, you stand in that, whether you're at work or at home or talking to your friends or your family or your boss. You know, that's also what it means where you're not constantly questioning and doubting who that person is and trying to change that person. You want to grow that person, right? You want to grow that person. You don't want to just be like, I need to be different today.
Yeah, yeah. But you touched on the term too much, being too much. And there's a value in being too much, although that thinking runs counter to what a lot of us have been told, and certainly in Black communities and people of color, where you're constantly told either outright or kind of, you know, under, you know, it's not very overt. It's to kind of keep it back, you know, you gotta kind of blend in and, you know, be a little more restrained and things like that. But you talk about, no, being too much is a good thing, and don't listen to those people who tell you to suppress that.
Yeah, everyone is too something. Everyone has been told at one point, too quiet, too sensitive, too loud, too aggressive, too Black, you know, just, we're always called to something. And I think that thing that we are too is usually our superpower, right? The kids who were called loud became amazing public speakers, right? Too dramatic, great actresses. So that thing that you are too, it is a benefit to people until they don't find it a benefit. So you just have to, you can't quiet it away. You can't say, you know what, I need to be less loud because they said I'm loud. I mean, you can be too loud in the library, sure. Right? You can be too loud in the library. Okay.
Right.
Chill, you know, bring your inside voice inside. But I think our superpowers lay with that thing that we're too. You know, when I was growing up, I was too loud. But really, was I? I just didn't know how to be quiet when I felt cheated. So I would be called too loud when I called it out. But that too loud now allows me to show up as this woman who's outspoken, who is opinionated, who hopefully, you know, speaks truth for those who don't have the platform to speak that truth for themselves. So it's another thing. I don't want us to worry about other people's judgments of us if those people aren't seeking our personal best. You know, and a lot of times, again, people who we love, people who love us will often be the ones making some of these judgments, you know? So we think because, well, that person's the one who said it, I should take it on and I should change that thing about me. If it is something innate about you and somebody wants you to change it, it should be, again, unless you're in a library being too loud, that's when you should be like, I'll change it for this moment. But out here, if somebody tells you to use your voice, it basically means they're saying that, like, if they're saying you're too something, they're saying be less, right? It's another way to tell somebody, I need you to be less. Yeah. And if they were to tell you be less, you'd be offended. But when it shows up as you're just too something, it sounds like a constructive criticism, but it's really not. Don't be less. Be the full you. You know, if I show up and I'm a lot sometimes because I have on a red lipstick and, you know, now I got my hair colored. So I show up and it's like, oh my God, there's a lot of color. The cover of my book, somebody will say is too much because it's bright red. It is fire engine red. It is the color of my lipstick right now. That can be too much for somebody. And if it's too much for somebody, then it's not for that person, right? That doesn't mean I should make the cover of the book black or brown, right? Or, you know, beige because somebody thought the red was too bright. The energy is red. Passion is red. Passion, energy, all of that stuff, that color, you can't ignore it. And I think that's the energy of the book. Be too much. Be loud. You know, this book, I wanted to jump off the shelves when people see it because they're like, I couldn't ignore that color. Yes. So however way you show up in the world, if your internal color is red, and I think mine is, because it's been my favorite color since I was 3. If your internal color is red, don't let somebody convince you to make it, you know, dishwasher liquid tan, okay? Yeah. Don't let them change your color, whatever that color is.
Yeah. And I think sometimes when people are saying you're too much, what they're really saying is, we want you to be more like us. We want you to fit into this mold. And yeah, you have to kind of start noticing those coded things, whether people are saying it consciously or unconsciously. It's wrong. It's not you.
Exactly. And a lot of it is just still projections of our, other people's ideas of themselves. And they might see you being the full you. And because they're not used to being the full them, your full you offends them. But that's not your business. Yeah. It's not your responsibility to make somebody else feel like you are on equal footing in terms of how you show up in a room. It doesn't mean that you have to, dress different because somebody was mad because you wore this thing. If that's your style, that's your style. Like, and I say this knowing also people operate in corporate, a lot of spaces where they have to diminish a little bit of who they are, or, they're in an office and they have to change your voice and code switch. Much love to everybody who has to do that. That's a survival technique that we've all taken on, especially Black women, especially marginalized people who will camouflage as a way to survive. And that's actually a form of courage. But it's for people who have the option not to, don't. Because I also think the world needs to get used to people in all their color. The world needs to get used to seeing people show up differently. The world needs to get used to the woman who might not have the polish you're expecting, but she's still excellent, right? Yeah. Or the person who might not speak in the way that you're used to, but they're still excellent. What they're saying is still valid. The person who might not have the professional look of the white button-up shirt still has the skills as much as anybody else. So we have to start getting used to people being themselves, because that difference really makes every room better.
Oh yeah, that's a great way of putting it. And you know what? I can't help but go back to something you said way at the beginning, that you turned down TED Talk 3 times. Yeah. How do you do that? And then once you did it, did you absolutely love it? Or was it like a real, I've heard from other authors that it's a really, like, leading up to it, it's very nerve-wracking, and everything has to be so exacting. Yes. But that said, please kind of walk us through getting 3 offers, turning them down, and then finally taking it and kind of just exploding on the scene there.
Yeah, so it was 2017. TED Women was happening in November in New Orleans. Pat Mitchell, who was curating TED Women, sent me a message probably May of that year and said, we want you to come speak at TED Women. And I was like, I don't have time, because that year, because my book had just come out the year before, hit the Times list, I was doing speaking engagements like every other day. Like I had a massively packed fall, and TED doesn't let you just show up and give a talk. TED assigns you a speaking coach. They go through your talk over and over again. You practice for months. Okay. They don't play. So I was like, I can't add a TED talk in the midst of all the things I'm already doing. So I won't even be able to give it the attention it deserves. So I turned it down. I said, I'm so sorry, I can't do it. So I was part of a 10-city speaking tour that fall. And the speaking tour was invited to do a talk at TED. And I was like, I can't do it. I actually have another speaking engagement the same day as TED Women. So I can't even make it to TED to even go watch my friends. So I turned that down. And then, yeah, I was actually keynoting and emceeing a conference in New York the same time as TED Women. So I was like, yeah, I definitely can't make it to TED for that, but I would have loved to go support my friends. So 2 or 3 weeks before TED Women, I realized that my speaking engagement in New York, I actually didn't have to be there until the day after, because the day of November 1st, it was really a VIP party. And I was like, I can miss that. I'm gonna go cheer on my friends at TED Women. So I emailed Pat Mitchell and I said, you know what? I would love to have a day pass so I can just, just come watch people kill the stage. Pat was like, if you're coming, I want you to speak. I was like, 3 weeks before? That's madness. And Pat Mitchell was like, yes, you got this, I'd love for you to speak. And I kept on. So I was turning it down. And I said, Pat, I can't make it because I actually have to be out of New Orleans on the last flight out that night. The last flight to New York was 8 p.m. TED Women was kicking off at 6 p.m. Pat literally was like, well, we'll just make you the opening speaker.
Oh my gosh.
I was like, this is actually nuts. Everybody else has had talks for the last 4 months and they've already coached. They've gotten it. They have nailed it. And this woman wants me to write a TED talk and present in 3 weeks. Crazy. So I wrote out an email about to reject TED for the 3rd time. I was like, the email was already composed. Pat's name was in the inbox and I was about to press send. And something was just like, you know what, call one of your friends. So I called one of my friends who's one of my dream enablers. She's one of the ones who enables me to be audacious. My girl, Unique Jones Gibson. And I said, so crazy. I've been asked to do this TED Talk. I already turned it down twice. I'm about to turn it down again, but I just wanted to call you because am I crazy? And she was like, why do you want to turn this down? I said, because everybody has already had a coach. They've already practiced their talk. This is nuts. 3 weeks before a TED Talk is not a thing. Like people don't just slide into TED. I was like, everybody has already practiced beyond what I can even think of having time to do because I still have 5 talks between now and TED. And she said, everybody ain't you. She was like, all the talking and all the speaking that you've been doing has been your coaching. You're ready for this. So get off my phone, delete that email, and go write your TED Talk. And she hung up on me. And that's exactly what I did. I deleted that email. The next morning, I was traveling to another city, and they needed a script of my TED Talk. And I was like, I don't even have time to do this, but okay. In the Uber on the way to the airport, I wrote my TED Talk and sent it to them, thinking and hoping that they would be like, you're right, this is trash, never mind. I landed in the city I was going to a message from the TED team. We love it. This is great. We're so looking forward to it. And I did the TED Talk, changed my life. And even the TED Talk and the process of me getting to the TED Talk was proven by the talk itself. Because the day before the TED Talk, I scrapped half the talk, deleted it because I was like, it's missing something. So I memorized the talk between my flight to New Orleans and me getting on stage. And what the TED Talk that you all see is exactly the TED Talk I gave. There were no edits. There were no stumbles. I gave it like I had been doing this talk for years. It was like an out-of-body experience. This thing that I was so afraid of because I didn't think I was ready for it, because I thought it was too much for me. I executed it seamlessly, got off that stage, jumped on a flight instantly from stage. And that talk now has 5 million views. That talk gets me messages all over the world every single day of people be saying like, I watched this and you made me do this thing I was afraid of. That talk is the reason why I get a lot of speaking engagements still. And it just proved to me to continue to do the things that might feel bigger, to do the things that I might not feel ready for, and to constantly know that I belong in any room that I find myself.
That is amazing. And we had comments of people saying, oh my gosh, I can't believe this story. It's amazing. It's kind of like telling a tennis player, well, I'm coming to watch Serena at the US Open. Oh, well, as long as you're coming, we're going to throw you in the
we're going to throw you on the court. And I'm like, what? Am I ready?
I haven't played tennis in 3 months. No.
Turns out I've been playing tennis.
See? That's amazing. How do you approach speaking versus your books and writing? Or do you approach them the same way?
I approach them the same way.
Do you?
Yeah. My writing connects and connected with people, especially when I first started in a way that I didn't think of, because people say when they read my words, they hear my voice. And that's the ultimate compliment. I want to write to people, not at them. So the way I write is the same way I speak. I want them to hear my voice. I want people to think like I'm actually having a conversation, even if they're saying nothing to me. So I approach it in the same way, with the idea of vulnerability, of truth at the end of it, and humor. Just knowing that I don't take myself too seriously. And if I can make people laugh, it means I bring their defenses down and we can find common ground. They're more willing to listen. So that's how I do all of it. Speaking, writing, podcasting, anything that I'm creating in this world is with the same lens.
Yeah. And I was going to say, that's the first thing I got from the books, was that you kind of meet up at the intersection of humor and there's a little bit of literary, like you can tell you're a good writer and you really, like you did all the blogging and it comes through, but it's very much full of your personality and kind of in your face, full of your personality, full of humor. I love it. I think it's the type, I think your books are the type of books that people will get a lot for themselves, be inspired by, but also want to pass on. Yeah, whether it's you're passing on the actual book you have or you're buying other books, but they're very, and not all books are like that. A lot of books I keep to myself, wouldn't even think of passing them on. But your books, I feel compelled to, you got to read this.
Yes, that is ultimate compliment. Yes.
You deserve it. Well, we want to bring in some other questions. Let's see what we've got going on here. People are making comments, asking questions. Oh, Valentina, do you have some? Am I reading?
Not yet, but if anybody has any questions, please drop them in the chat. I just dropped a little chat myself.
Cool.
Yeah, no, I'm excited for this book to be out in the world because I think, yeah, like I said, this is a book that I wish I had 10 years ago. Like, I hope somebody else picks this book up and goes, oh my gosh, I know exactly somebody who needs this book, right? And can buy them a copy. Look, buy them copies because you're going to want to keep yours. That's what I'm saying. So yeah, that is the dream, is to have this book be timely and timeless. Where
is it coming out? Is it going to be released in paperback or hardbound first?
Hardback. It is available for pre-order. It's coming out March 2nd, 2021. It is going to look beautiful, even more beautiful than this, this paperback. It is just, I'm looking forward to it.
Okay. And you said March or May?
March 2. So 3/2/2021.
Cool. Perfect timing. Time. Spring.
We have a couple questions in the chat. So one is, who are some other troublemakers that inspire you or inspired the book? And in tandem with that, can you talk a little about your troublemaking grandmother?
Yes. So she's one of the main troublemakers that inspires me. My grandmother, Fumi Faloyin, and growing up watching her be this chill deficient Nigerian grandmother who just owns every room that she's in, even if she knows nobody, who makes friends everywhere, who is not afraid of using her power for somebody else who doesn't have as much. She is who anchors this book, and I'm so excited for people to meet her. Like, I hope people can read the stories about her in the book and be like, I know that woman. Because we all know that the woman who is older, who you can't tell them nothing, you can't check them. They do whatever they want, say whatever they want to whoever, but they're so kind. Everything about them is from this heart of gold. And that is actually at the core of professional troublemaking, the heart of gold. It's not about you creating chaos. It is about you doing what is necessary to make every room better. So she's definitely my top troublemaker. She's who this book is dedicated to. And she's who, whose life inspires me, and her journey and her fullness inspires me. So, yeah.
Awesome. Also, I'm also interested in this question. Will there be an audio version read by Luvvie?
Yes, absolutely. So book 1, I read that. It ended up actually winning the audio award for best humor book, which I didn't even know was a thing. That's so dope. So, and there are a lot of people who've read the book who went back to buy the audio version. Same experience for book 2. Like, Professional Troublemaker has to be read by me. So the audio version is actually already available for pre-order too. I'm looking forward to the studio session where I have to sit there for 3 days, because that's how long it basically takes to record an audiobook. And, put my voice and tone and intention and energy into people listening to this book, so it can accompany you in your car, at home, while you're washing dishes if you need to. Just a friendly voice that pushes you forward and tells you, you got this.
It's wonderful. I'm so excited. I love audiobooks. also, and was wondering, what are you excited about exploring now, if we can ask?
I mean, you know, ventures I haven't had yet, exploring TV, exploring, what does it look like to be a conduit to content producing, being a teacher in this world, right? So I'm going to be teaching different classes because one of the things that I know I'm really good at is teaching people what I know. So I'm going to start teaching and just spending time in Love Nation. Love Nation is my app. My community is called Love Nation because they named themselves this 4 years ago. I think they voted. So I actually have an app you can download in the App Store called Love Nation, Luvv Nation, where really thoughtful people gather. So I'm interested in constantly building community and creating spaces that are full of joy, are full of thoughtfulness, and humor. And that's what Love Nation is. So I'm going to be exploring Love Nation even more, bringing classes and all types of giveaways and just loving up on the people who love up on my work.
That's great. Do you ever think that you would write literary fiction or any other genre, or is this your lane? Nonfiction, inspiring humor?
I'm open. I think, the fear of not knowing that realm means I might have to try to conquer it. That fear of, I don't know how to write a novel means I might want to learn and create random worlds and put them on paper. So definitely not out of the question.
All right, wonderful. This is a perfect stopping point because we've hit time. If you folks haven't seen it, I also dropped the Love Nation app. I found it on Apple in the chat, but if you just Google it, you can find on the website, the blog. But I want to thank you again, Luvvie and Paula, for helping us out today. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And to everyone else participants, if you joined in a little late, we'll have the beginning and the whole video up on our YouTube as soon as possible. But yes, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Khalifa.
Thank you.